our 10-year vision is for every runner in the world to have heard of RunThrough, and I know that's a bit crazy, and that's the whole point in coming up with something like that. I actually emailed them every year we had RunThrough from the start to put a race on. Yeah, I feel like we have helped change running for the better, and I think that we have a big responsibility now to be able to keep on pushing that and keep on keeping it accessible to as many people as possible.
You need to get into like this Eddie Hearn type role. I want an Instagram account. Out of context,
No context.
words.
Absolutely unbelievable.
My name is Matthew Wood, and I'm from a place called Blackburn in the northwest of England. I've been living in London for around 10 years now. Whereas before that, I lived in Australia and a bit in the USA, so traveled around quite a bit. And we organise events at RunThrough. That's a brand I started with my business partner, Ben Green. We founded that in 2013. And off the back of that, we created an agency called GW Active, and that has lots of associated brands like Runna retreats and lots of cool things that are all to do with keeping people fit, healthy, active. And that's what I love doing myself as well. I get out, I run races, do marathons sometimes. I train, I go to the gym, I live an active lifestyle. So I enjoy doing that, and also enjoy going to our events and meeting people that have similar interests and getting outside and enjoying themselves, and working with the RunThrough team as well, who are also into the same things that I'm into. So I've got a pretty cool life, varied, and that's me.
Mate, I feel like this has been a very long time coming, because, I mean, a little glimpse behind the curtain, I guess. Me and you sat down probably 3 years ago or something and started talking about making things like videos for YouTube, and then that kind of went into then doing the podcast, and we're now here doing the podcast. You're on the podcast. It's quite cool. It's like a full circle type situation. And I think like that's a nice place to start, is taking people that are maybe just meeting the face behind the brand all the way back for the first time, and kind of finding out a little bit about how you and Ben started RunThrough initially.
Yeah, just on the podcast itself, like when we first decided to do this, you and I, and we were talking about finding a way to kind of get interviews with runners and people who are really inspiring, and sharing that with people. And you're obviously the best person to do that in terms of your expertise, your knowledge of the industry, your personality, the way you talk, the way you communicate. So we thought,
Bless you.
how do we find the best person to work with? And you are the best person to work with. And the Gone Running podcast has gone from strength to strength over the years. And now we're getting some really cool guests on here. And it's really interesting. The viewership's improving month by month. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it's gone so far. But that's the podcast itself. But to your question, and to run through and how it started, Ben Green and I were both runners at Loughborough University. We trained together, we raced against each other. And we also knew each other when we were little as well. I think Ben was the first person to beat me in a race, which was really annoying. he was
not that you let that one go or anything.
No, it still annoys me to this day. But yeah, he was a year above me at school, and that's what I'm clinging on to, as he was a bit older than me. But he beat me in a 1500 meter race one day, and I've never forgotten him since. But yeah, we became good friends at Loughborough, and when we both finished Loughborough, we both did different things. He went to work for Unilever in the graduate scheme there, and rising up the ranks within that company. I travelled a bit, started different businesses, lived in different countries, then started one in the UK doing marketing and SEO, that sort of stuff for different pharmaceutical brands. And we kind of chatted and said, we want to do something in the industry that we love. We love events, we love running. What can we do? So RunThrough was born. And we did that alongside our other businesses and jobs for about 3 years before we got our first full-time employee. So it was a bit of time before we actually got help, but we grew from, I think, 8 events to like 30 events before we did that. So there was plenty of time before RunThrough became what it is now, where it was just Ben and I working on events and finishing work at like 6 o'clock and then getting home and planning and plotting until the early hours of the morning every day, and loading vans and hiring. Well, our flats were just full of stuff for events, medals, but bananas, like signs, everything. I just couldn't move in my flat for RunThrough equipment because we couldn't really afford to buy a storage unit. So there was plenty of time where it was just me and him, and it was like amazing. It was the best time ever. So loved it.
That first event, because I remember talking to you about this in the past, but for people that won't have heard about that first event, how chaotic was it? Like putting on that first event and just getting everybody there and getting everybody started and over the line. Because at that point, it must be like, okay, this is happening. But everything leading up to that must have been pretty, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah, maybe a bit of that. I did have event experience. So I did work at Great Run London Marathon where I was working in the elite teams and working on putting events. So I also had a nightclub business where I was organising nightlife events, which is a completely different thing because doing the same thing, but everyone's drunk. So making sure that everyone's doing that is pretty hard to do. But so I had a good event experience, but all the nuances that go into a running event and all the little things that happen and the way that the course is spread across like 5, 10 half marathon distances, it's not easy to do. It takes a certain level of attention, and working with Ben and him being the first time doing that and us the first time working together on one event, we very quickly worked out each other's strengths and weaknesses and what we should be doing, what I should be doing, what he should be doing. So yeah, it was chaotic behind the scenes, but on the day I felt like everyone enjoyed themselves. There was no complaints. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. It was funny because we dragged in all our friends and family members to help out. So some of the people that we work with day by day, and even now, like Chris Parr, who's one of our full-time staff members, works up in the Northeast, putting on Northeast events. He was there on that first day. Gemma and Lewis from New Levels Coaching, they were there on that first ever event day. My family members, like there was loads of people that turned up to help out. It's a real collection of our friends and family. But yeah, we enjoyed that, and then we enjoyed it so much we decided to put on more and more of them. So it can't have gone that bad.
And more.
Exactly.
I think going back to you just saying then about having like getting your first full-time member of staff, and something I loved seeing this year was both you and Ben actually both put up an Instagram post with last year's Christmas party, so 2022's Christmas party, and then 2023's Christmas party with the now full team and all the full-time staff. And the difference between just 12 months is unreal to see. But when you take the team this year and look back to when you only had one full member of staff and you two, like, what's it like having that idea and now just seeing it just literally grow and grow and grow year by year by year? What's that like for you to see that and to feel it and in real time employ these people?
I think you can relate it to running in a way. So when you start off and you've detrained yourself, we haven't done training for a while, and you go and you do 20 miles a week for 6 to 8 weeks, you start improving, and you don't really notice your improvements until you then do a race, for example, and your time improves, or you do a tempo run around a certain loop and your time gets better. It's the same thing when you're trying to grow business as well. You're in the moment, you're growing, you're not really thinking about it. You're just doing the thing that you need to do to improve, to grow. So it never really feels like any different to what it did a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. In fact, if anything, it's getting a little bit easier because there's more people to work with on certain things. You have conversations around topics that you're really excited about and love talking about, like running events and everything to do with running essentially and sport. And you get to work with people who are actually engaged in that. Whereas before, when we first started, it was quite literally just fighting fires and working together and making sure we didn't do anything wrong, really. Whereas now it's like thinking about how we can improve things. And that's amazing. It doesn't feel any more or less stressful. In fact, if you looked at what we did with the early years and the team that we worked with, especially that first five full-time employees, it was chaotic. I think myself, Ben, Lucy, Harfield, Jack Williams, Jason Prickett, like we were all Sophie Carr. We were all driving up and down the motorway to Tatton Park in Manchester, and then driving back down to London to do an event there. And like now we have staff members that are based in certain regions and they do a lot less events than we were doing. I think Jason one year did 110 events in a year.
That's insane.
And like Ben and I will be doing a very similar amount to that, but it's a lot of events. So it's a bit simpler now from that perspective. It feels nicer, but I'm so excited about the future because of all the people we're working with and because of the great people we've brought into the business. And yeah, that image that you look at with the difference in staff members, that is just the effects of trying to diversify what we have. So it's not just the running events, it's supporting other people's running events, it's supporting charities, it's all these things coming together is the staff base you see now. So we are diversifying what we do. We are helping more and more event businesses to do their thing better as well, to up the standards of delivery in the UK. I think that's something that we're really passionate about as well.
Where does this passion come from, mate? Because like you're so passionate about, the tagline is inspiring an active nation through running. Like where is that passion from? Where did that begin?
Passion for running, I suppose it comes from my dad when I was younger. So he was a 2:30 marathon runner, and he was the chairman of the local running club. He took me from the age of 6, 7 to all the sports hall stuff. I was doing all the different long jump and javelin and all these different things, and I focused on sprinting because that was what I was good at. And then when I was really young, I used to win all the sprint races at school, and up until I was 13, I was just winning everything sprint wise. And then I got to a point where I wasn't winning at county level. I was getting defeated, and I thought maybe I'll step up a distance. And then I stepped up to the 800 meters, and I really found my groove. Then I won national titles, and I competed for England when I got to like my junior levels, like 16, 17, 18. Then I went to Loughborough University on a sports scholarship. So I was always just thinking about running, and I was always thinking about how to be the best at running. My dream was to be in the Olympics, try and make the Olympics. I've got really good friends now who actually went to the Olympics, who were my rivals at the time at university, and I never quite made it. So I think the drive that I had for that has just been transferred over to doing the same thing for millions of other people around the UK, getting running in their lives and getting fitness in their lives so they can live longer, so they can live healthier lifestyles, so they can meet new friends. Like that sort of stuff is all interesting to me. That sort of stuff I feel is my duty to do. So yeah, that drive comes from just making sure that running or fitness is ingrained in everyone's life, because it's done so much for me over the years. And I can say the same thing about Ben as well. Like Ben's dad, some of you guys might follow him on Instagram. Graham Green, at age 50, he's running 2:30 marathons. Like he's absolutely amazing. And that intensity, that ability to push yourself was ingrained into Ben at a young age. And Ben was competing at a high level, like a similar level to myself. At the junior ages, we competed against each other. He was one of the fastest ever 800 meter runners this country has seen. And he competed internationally in different countries. He was on TV. He was a fantastic 800 meter runner. And he, from that, the dedication it takes to do that can be applied to any walk of life when that finished. So when he finished running, he then applied that to his work life, to his career at the time. And then he applied that to RunThrough. So we both come from that background of winning, from sport, from training, from pushing ourselves. And I think that's really easy to push into other realms of life if you wanted to.
I think work ethic's such a massive thing. Like I can't necessarily relate it to running, but I can relate it to sport, whether that be rugby or work. When I was a kid, I was brought up on a farm, in a farming background, and like I knew what a hard day's work was, because if your dad tells you to go out and sweep the yard at 7 a.m. in the morning and don't come back until it's clean, you're like, okay, I'm going to be out there for a bit. Like, this is going to take a while. So like, I think sometimes when you've had that when you're younger, like into your adolescence and then into work life, you just have that ingrained into you. And yeah, mate, I mean, from just looking at it from the outside, you and Ben, your work ethic, both of you, is like absolutely insane. And it just is so inspirational to see the business continuing to grow, because I started with you guys probably 6 or 7 years ago now, which feels mad to say, up at a Media City event. And I remember going there and hosting that first race, and it just being similar in a lot of ways in values to what it is now. Like the values have never changed, but the growth of the team, the amount of events, the size of the fields, that's all changed. And it's just amazing to see the continued growth. Looking forward, how do you continue to grow? How does that growth continue in the trajectory that it's been going?
Yeah, to your point just before about the work ethic and that side of things, I think when you're organising events, you're having to do lots of tasks that might not be overly glamorous.
Yeah.
Like we're literally talking pulling keys out of portaloos. Like we're talking like picking up rubbish in fields and in the wind and rain, and putting up signage and loading vans and unloading vans, and there's all these tasks that you think on the outset don't need to happen, but we had to do all those tasks with it RunThrough to get to the point we're at. And like Ben worked at Domino's, I worked at McDonald's when we were both younger as part-time jobs from like age of 16 till we went to university. So we both did normal jobs. We both come from that like background, like working class background, I suppose, to some extent. So we have that in us naturally, and I think that helps. And in terms of moving forward from where we are now to where we want to get to, it's a case of just looking at the market in the UK and seeing our position within it. So before, there'll be lots of events that were happening by different organisers, and now it's kind of formulating. There's really a small group of organisers that do most of the events, like the bottom tier in terms of like people coming to a free event as a parkrun event, and then the middle of the events is essentially RunThrough, have that entire middle segment from the 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, and then you get to the big city marathons like your Great North Run and London Marathon and stuff like that. So there's very few operators within that field. So it's our responsibility to keep on putting on events for people in areas that don't have events, putting on events in areas that do have events, but making sure they're really good at entertaining and changing it up and making sure it's entertaining enough for people to come back to. The medal changes, the event villages changes, the entertainment, all those things matter, and improving things and innovating as we go along. We can't be the same as we were 5 years ago. Like you said, there's people and staff, the ethics and the community that we created at the start, we want to keep in there, and that's harder and harder to do because you get a little bit further away from it. But we're still checking every comment that people write. It hurts when you get a bad one, and it feels amazing when you get a good one. And that sort of detail, I think, matters. And you have to continue that going no matter how many events you have. And then the future as well, like talking about different countries and expanding RunThrough around the world. And like our 10-year vision is for every runner in the world to have heard of RunThrough. And I know that's a bit crazy, and that's the whole point in coming up with something like that. But maybe we could get to that one day. We've done so much in 10 years so far in the UK, then why can't we do that around the world? And we can inspire running in people in places that don't necessarily have the opportunities to do that. Then that's great. And then within the UK as well, we did the world's first free roll close half marathon race, which you were at. You were on the microphone and you were talking, and it was unreal. Like to be able to have people who wouldn't necessarily think about entering a running event get a free race, and not just a 5K where it's just so short, you don't really get that much benefit from it if you're doing that. If you're doing a half marathon and training for that, you've got to do 5Ks, 10Ks to be able to get to the point where you can actually run it. So that involves like a lifestyle shift, a lifestyle change. And if we can do that by offering something free once a year to people, or even around the country multiple times a year, that's a really inspirational goal for me to have as well. So we can give this stuff free. And you can't just do that without having a really big infrastructure, without having really, really kind sponsors and partners helping with that sort of thing. And eventually, hopefully, like these other companies get government funding for this sort of stuff, of which we don't. And maybe one day we'll get some sort of support from that side of things. It's not something we're relying on, but we'd like to think that the country should be focused on health, fitness, keeping people like away from using the National Health Service. And I do think like quite big like that. I do think running can be part of everyone's life. If running is part of everyone's life in the country, then we're not going to get ill as much. We're not going to get, obviously there's nuances within that and things you can't change, but on a whole, if the country is running, if the country keeping themselves fit, we're in a much better place. So yeah, all those things go through my mind when I think about the future. And I know you can't affect everything and you can't do everything, but it's nice to be able to dream.
I think as well, like the past 5 years, not just within RunThrough, but running as a whole, to me, kind of being in the world, in the space, it does feel like running is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as a thing. Like you're seeing a lot more quote unquote influencers, you're seeing a lot more people with some sort of pull taking up running and really like promoting it as a sport. And it's interesting what you just said about Run Through there and kind of positioning, being in that kind of middle tier and putting on events for everybody. And now really, truly for everybody when it comes to like the free mass participation events. There's got to be some sort of correlation, right, between Run Through growing and the growth of running growing as well. Do you see that correlation at all?
Yeah, like I do feel like we've had a really positive impact on the growth of running the last like 10 years. I think obviously when we started, it was really just club races. So a running club would organise a club race to fund their club for the year. And that's harder and harder and harder to do with volunteers and with rising costs, traffic management. So even like 15 years ago, a lot of these races didn't close roads for the thing. They just run it on the side of the road. And because of like public health and safety mechanisms that get put in place by councils, it's harder and harder and it costs more and more to do this sort of thing. So you need to ask for a little bit of people to be able to do this sort of stuff. And yeah, I feel like we have helped change running for the better. And I think that we have a big responsibility now to be able to keep on pushing that and keep on keeping it accessible to as many people as possible, whilst also not forgetting the front end and the elite side of things, which is something that we're conscious of. And it's the sport athletics is sometimes gets bad attention, gets lack of attention in it more than anything really. But the running side of it, the distance running, the road running, it is getting more popular. You got to think like trail running and all this stuff is triathlon. Like, it's a good TV sport because it's competitive at the front end. And we want to Run Through, try and do a bit of that as well. So this year we're having a new series called the Top Flight Races. So we're actually putting a bit of prize money behind things and picking one event every single month to promote an elite front end. We're going to live stream it. We're going to have a ranking table. We're going to have an end of year prize for the winner of it. It's a whole new project that we're trying to build into it. So we really are covering the full stretch of the elites to your normal club runners, to people running for the first time, people running for charities, to also people running for free and people not doing anything before and then doing a run with us. So I think, yeah, the bigger you get, the more resource you have, the more you're able to do that sort of stuff. But it's all fine margins and we need to make sure we're economical with how we do things. But yeah, it's really exciting.
It's a strange one running when it comes to like the elite field. I'm super excited about next year in terms of what Run Through are doing, because there's some amazing races to start with that these fields are going to be at, and it's going to be so good to have those people on the start lines as well. But running's dead interesting because if you play rugby, you watch elite rugby, you watch club rugby. If you play football, you watch club football, you watch elite football. For some reason, if you run, you don't necessarily watch running. And I don't know what that is. Like, I don't get it, because actually when you well, I mean, I love it, so I'm interested in it. But when you do start delving into it, the personalities, the people, the fields, the events, the places, like there's so much there, isn't there?
Definitely. But we're a tribal like world. Like we support our local club, we support our country. And I do feel like during the Olympics and the World Championships, people do tend to watch the athletics on the TV and they do get behind the team. Like the 2012 Olympics in the UK, you can see how that changed everything. So I think week by week, no, there's nothing that people really get into. But those big events, the Olympics and the World Championships and the things that get everyone's attention of the best in the world, trying to run the fastest times or run the marathon and win that race. And that really galvanizes a place when there's a team behind it. And it's hard to create that. And in other sports, like where it's one versus one, like boxing or UFC or that sort of stuff, you can really get behind one person because you're going to see them fight another person. Whereas in running, you're seeing potentially 10, 15 people that could win a race. So you can't really tell the story, the narrative behind each person, because that will take too much airtime up. So it would take too much marketing pounds and dollars to spend to try and promote all those people. Whereas in other sports, you pick the team or you pick the person. So it's, unless you all jump behind one runner or two runners and made it about them, it's very difficult. But yeah, I do get what you mean. It's harder to do.
I think it is starting a little bit as well, that kind of one versus one. I think the media are kind of using the term media very loosely, but I think people are starting to jump on the fact that like running is huge now and it's just exponentially growing year by year. And again, I'm using running as a very broad term here, but
Yeah.
you know, you're seeing the world records getting broken, you're seeing fast times getting run on the track, and then you're seeing somebody like Josh Kerr having a pop at Jakob on a podcast, and then it's like there's this niggle between two people that builds and builds and builds, and hopefully next time those two race, like a lot of people will be really hyped about that situation, which
Definitely.
will be really cool. Mate, you're gonna be. You need to get into like this Eddie Hearn type role. I want an Instagram account. Out of
No
context,
context.
words.
Yeah, I like that side of things. I watch a lot of boxing and that sort of stuff, fight sport things, and I do think that should be brought into athletics in a way. And like you said, Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr, like kind of thing is really interesting. And I think the more they can build on that, even if it probably is genuine, but if they made it a bit more forced and they created some sort of dynamic. In the 80s, there was the co-Yvette thing. Like you literally had the news stop to show a race between between both of them, and they passed the world record between each other, and that stuff was really interesting. But now you've got so many other distractions and so many other sports to focus on, and the powerhouse of football, it just dominates all sports channels, and that's great. I love the football as well. I'm a massive football fan, but it does mean that these smaller sports get pushed to the side a little bit, and I suppose it's partly our responsibility to make it entertaining. And hopefully with the stuff we're doing at Trackster and the Instagram channel there and promoting cool content around the sport and highlighting things that are happening within it, we're doing our bit from that perspective as well. And it's a new project we're taking on in the last 6 months, but I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we can build that into something really interesting on the same level as some of the big established media brands in the athletic space.
Yeah, but I want you standing between the two of them having a face-off or something like that. I think that would be class. Yeah, you're just standing there, just checking nothing's going to pop off. You personally, mate, before we wrap this up, you've had quite a journey this year yourself when it comes to your health and fitness. You've properly got back into everything. You never let everything go completely. You were always running events and keeping yourself fit, and you've like you say, you've always been that person. But this year there really has been kind of like a personal transformation back to like a place that you want to be in terms of your running fitness and your overall health and fitness. Why was that decision made to kind of like properly get yourself back to a place that you're happy to be, essentially?
Yeah, I think something has to be so wrong that you have to find a reason for doing the opposite in a way.
Yeah.
And I never really got to the point where it was so wrong, but I think an accumulation of just boiled down to laziness in my own body and lack of discipline, really. I was always running. I was always running like 2 or 3 times a week, and I was always getting injured and having issues. And during lockdown, I started stretching every day, and something I've talked about quite a bit. I've got a YouTube channel which I've started to promote myself, and the stuff that I'm doing on there a little bit more. And it's really interesting to talk about this sort of stuff. And it's a nice outlet for me to have to do that. I don't know what the real intention is behind it, but I just feel like I should share some things about how I do stuff, because I think
you're a creative as well, mate, aren't you? Like you are at heart a creative, so like just creating just sometimes feels good.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a nice.
It doesn't have to necessarily be like it needs to get to this point. Just keep creating, keep doing it, innit?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I just never was a bit nervous around doing it, but yeah. So I think that coincided with me actually changing up my mentality on things and the diets and making sure I wasn't eating 4 bags of cookies every night unconsciously. I still have bags of cookies whenever I feel like it, but I'm tracking it. I'm aware of it. I know that I'm doing it, so then I can rectify it in the next few days, or at least be aware that I shouldn't be doing that every single night. By doing those things, which is effectively cutting out 2,000 calories a day worth of like rubbish, essentially, having to run to kind of burn that off, I've just found my body weight get back to a level where I think is more natural for my height, essentially. And my body composition has improved because of it. I've also started going to the gym as well, which I've always avoided because I find it boring. But I'm going 2 or 3 times a week. In fact, I've done it 3 times a week for like 6 months now, and I can just see the difference. you lift heavier weights, you just feel stronger. Doing leg weights as well, which is the worst day of my week. But once I've done it, I feel like, okay, I'm getting stronger. You can see the benefits, like a little kilogram more every time, and just little wins. And I never thought it would be like that in the gym. You can create yourself little wins every single time you go in there. Whereas a run, there's a bit of difference to it because you can go out one day, the wind could be howling, and you might put the same effort in but run a bit slower. With the gym, it's really like a closed loop kind of skill, and you can just put the fold of it every single day. So I like that part of it, not so much the actual going there and the faff of getting changed and doing it all. But that's been a bit of a lifestyle change for me. I've definitely felt the benefits personally. Feel stronger, feel happier, feel in a better place. Feel like I can jump into any sport or any race without worrying about anything. And it means I've got a lot of context for people who are in a similar position, so I can explain things in a way that they can understand as well, because I wasn't in shape and I have lost 10 kilograms in that space of time, and I can provide a bit of insight for that rather than it only being from an elite angle, of which I was when I was younger. It's difficult to explain something when you're trying to be the best in the world to someone who doesn't even think about that sort of stuff. Whereas now I have just been like everyone else in the world, but also have that knowledge and insight from trying to be one of the best in the world. So together it means I've got a good, but I have a conversation with someone at a race, like I can maybe be helpful.
We'll put that video that Matt's talking about as well, kind of the transformation video in the description to this. So do go and check that out. Subscribe to Matt's channel as well if you're not, because there's some amazing insights. And also I really like to see you traveling. I like to see you going to different places. I like kind of like the whole process behind the business as well, which you share up there too, which I think is amazing. We were in Blackburn not too long ago, a few weeks ago when we were recording this, and we went for a run afterwards. And all I could think of on the drive home was how cool that must be for you to have an event at a football club that you support in a place that you call home. Like that has to be one of, I'm not going to say your favorite events because I know there's so many events, it'd be difficult to pick a favorite one. They're like all your children, but that must feel quite like looking round thinking, I created this. The reason this is here is because of me and Ben.
Definitely. And Blackburn for me is where I brought up. It's like you said, went to school. The team I supported used to go sit in the terraces with my dad from the age of like 5 or 6. As soon as I could walk, essentially, I was watching games until I was 18 when I left university. So to then put a race on there, which is something I do day by day, it's been a passion. I actually emailed them every year we had RunThrough from the start to put a race on. Yeah. And eventually you get one proactive person at a location that goes, yes, I want to do this as well. And Jess from Blackburn at the time was one of those people who did that. And now we've got to know the community trust team there. Everyone at the community trust are really passionate about the events, and they've involved the club as well. So we get to know different people and characters at the club. And for me, that's amazing because it's something I've always wanted to know, the behind the scenes of the place that you've supported your whole life. And I imagine anyone else would feel the same. But I have such a connection to that race that I'm so proud of it. Sometimes it might not get the numbers of people compared to other events we have, but it doesn't matter to me. If I'm giving something to the town that doesn't exist, and that's given me so much, that's one small thing I can do for the world that I was brought up in. So, yeah, I love it.
We'll finish this with this, mate. And it's a big question, but what does running mean to you? What is it?
I've asked this before. I said it's my everything, but I probably don't think it's my everything. But I think it's like the baseline for everything that I do. If I don't go for a run, if I don't have that time to myself every day where I go for 30 minutes to an hour, I've done a bit of gym recently, so it's the same kind of thing. But that peace and quiet, time with my thoughts, the ability to keep my body healthy, active. I don't function as well as I can, and I get a bit more irritable. My decision making isn't as good. It's my baseline. So if I don't do or have running in my life, I find it very hard. I know someday I might get injured, I might not be able to run, so I have to prepare for that sort of stuff. But I'm doing everything I possibly can to make sure that doesn't happen to me with the stretching and the strength training. So fingers crossed, it's going to be my baseline for the rest of my life. But I'm prepared for all scenarios.